Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about cheese. I really like cheese. Cheese is good on everything. I really want some cheese. No, wait, today we're talking about dead levels. I want to answer a question from commenter Enderir. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Enderir asked, what are your thoughts on dead levels, or level ups or the equivalent, where characters get nothing at all, or only the standard stuff for leveling, such as hit points, magic points, skill points, but no new spells, perks, or notable character abilities? When are these dead levels wise to include, if at all, and how do they affect players, designers, and world building? He goes on to say, when I said this was too complex of an answer for me to leave a comment for, so I said I'd do a video, and he said, well, just to give you an example from Temple of Elemental Evil, meaning D&D 3.5, a fighter at level 5 is a dead level, as are most odd fighter levels. Sorcerer 2 is also mostly a dead level since it doesn't grant any new spells or spell levels class features. It's a good question, and it was very cheeky using one of my own games as an example. So I liked it, and also this question has a long enough, nuanced enough, I know I use that word a lot, but I'm basically saying I don't like truly dead levels, but I have to explain like where my cutoff point is for me considering a level dead. And of course, yeah, you can see games of mine that have dead levels. I'll point out that Temple, and I think I've mentioned this before, it's one of those games where I didn't create the setting, the story, or the system mechanics. So I did get a couple of my own ideas in there, but for the most part, that dead level was straight out of 3.5. And don't misunderstand me. 3.5 is my favorite D&D game. I mentioned it on my D&D video. I'll link it below. So, just to reiterate, I don't like dead levels. I try to avoid them in my games. And I consider a dead level anything where the player either gets absolutely nothing or something so truly basic and small, and I would call non-impactful, like a little bit of hit points, a few extra magic points, a skill point or two. I consider that to be a dead level. Because my design philosophy is I prefer that the player be given something impactful every time they level up. Leveling up should be an event. It should be exciting. They should look forward to it. That should be that thing where you're just going to play for another 20 minutes, right? Because you just are about to hit the next level. And then, of course, you get something cool in that next level. So I'm just going to play for another 20 minutes because I want to see what that cool new ability does. And then it's dawn. We've all been there. I find that if there's a level that just gives you some hit points or magic or skill points, if it's just a small number of points, and especially if they are given every time you go up a level, if that's all you get, it feels really slight. It feels like there's nothing special. I get these every level. So that's why it feels like a dead level. And also, it makes no impact. And by impact, I mean, if it increases something, if it's not a new ability that you can use when you want. So it's something passive, like a passive perk or an ability. Or a hit points, or extra, fatigue points or something. It needs to be chunky. And a good example of that would be 10 or 20 hit points would be chunky, but 2 or 3 isn't. Because 10 or 20 can probably help you survive a blow, a melee attack, or a ranged attack. But 2 or 3 hit points isn't. It's going to occasionally make the difference between whether you go unconscious, but usually not. And that's what I mean by impactful. Something where the player's like, ooh, I used to be taken down by 2 skeleton hits before, and I went up a level, and now I can last for 3 or 4 skeleton hits. That's like a noticeable, impactful change. It feels rewarding, and that's what another thing I mean by impactful. It has to feel like the player immediately notices them getting something out of it, not something numerical. There are players out there who are happy just to see, a 2 go to a 3, but most of them want the game to feel better. And be more, it's something that you notice while you're playing, not while you're staring at the character sheet. So, I would rather instead of giving the player a few extra hit points every level, which is, I know, something I haven't done in most of my games. Most of my games, I said, okay, every time you go up a level, you get some hit points. Consider this. What if you made a game where every 3 levels, you got a new perk or ability, and then every 3 levels at a different 3rd level, you got a bunch of skill points. And then every third level at a different one from those two, you got a lot of hit points. Not just 2 or 3 or 5, but like 10 or 15 or 20. What this means is every single time you go up a level, you will get something big, impactful, and different. So you might go up a level and it says, hey, you get to pick a new perk. And you're like, oh, and there's all these cool perks you qualify for. And you're looking, you're like, I can't wait to try that one. Oh, I got this one. It lets me shoot farther or shoot 2 arrows at once or attack with one bow and arrow attack. I can target 2 different things because I have ricocheting arrows or something. You want to try that out. Then you go up level again and you get a lot of skill points. You can take one skill up really high, or you can take several skills up still high enough to notice a change of their behavior in gameplay. And then you go up another level and you get a ton of hit points. And you're like, wow, I'm going to go back and beat up that boss because it was really close. I almost beat him before. I bet you with that new perk, with the extra skill points I put in on Pound, and all these extra hit points, I'm going to crush that boss. That's what I mean by chunky and impactful. At this point, you're probably going, hey, how do I decide what impactful is? I've talked about this a lot, but I will refer you specifically to 2 other videos rather than repeat that all here. The first video is the one on when you're trying to decide ranges and bonuses. I first brought that up in a skill design and RPG video, which I'll link below, where when you're trying to decide, like, how big should the skill ranges go? Should they be 0 to 5, 0 to 10, 0 to 20, 0 to 100? I talk about the pros and cons of different ranges and how they correspond to the effects of those skills and what kind of bonuses you can get for those skills from perks, from items, from spending additional skill points, things like that. But the other part of this decision making that you have to do is people have said, hey, there's so many things like that you have to choose. How in the world do you go about balancing it? Well, I have a video called Balancing Game Features, and I will link that below. But the gist of that is, I talked about my stick a pin in it method. Pick something, stick a pin in it. Keep designing. If everything still looks good, stick pins in those things. Keep designing. The moment something looks out of whack, it's like, this looks imbalanced, or I'm not getting very impactful effects from this. Go back to the last thing you stuck a pin in, take those pins out, and make changes there to see if it changes that problem you ran into. If it doesn't, back up again and stick those next set of pins out. By making those distinct tracked changes in your design balance as you go along, you can undo them to try to fix any problems you run into. In particular for this, if you were to implement that every 3 levels, you get something different, you can start changing how big those things are. Maybe you gave 10 hit points every 3 levels. Maybe that should be 15. Maybe that should be 20. Or maybe you gave 10 skill points every 3 levels. Maybe that should be 20. Maybe that should be 50. It depends on what your ranges are, which from that skill design video I talk about ranges, and what kind of balance issues you're running into from the balance video. So I think all this fits in with my previous design philosophies. Didn't always do this because, as I've mentioned on many videos, the director doesn't always get their way, and there are often other constraints. Either you're using an IP that already defines this, or it was a design fallback to go back and make some of those things, and you never had the time or money to go back and make those fallbacks. So anyway, I hope, Enderear, that this answered your question. And now I'm going to go get some cheese.